Welcome, as always, to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Well, Russ McDaid joins me, and we're going to have an important senior citizen update. But first, Laura Ellsworth, she's one of the Republican candidates for governor. She's on the program, and we'll talk to her in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, I think you're well aware by now that there's a Republican gubernatorial contest going on in the state with three candidates. They've been traveling the state. The commercials have filled the airwaves, where we've had Scott Wagner on, one of the candidates, a couple of weeks ago. Paul Mango, a second candidate, will be on, scheduled for next week. Joining me, sitting across from me, is Laura Ellsworth. She's the head of Global, I have to get this right, Global Community Service Initiative, right, and an attorney for a very large law firm, Jones Day. You got a couple hundred people out there, don't you?
Yeah, we got 2,500 people, 43 offices, 5 continents around the world.
Oh my, what? I don't know who runs that and keeps that operating. It's almost like running state government, which is what you want to do, right?
Exactly right. Exactly
All right.
Right.
Well, let's get down to a couple of the issues. I want to start first, as you look into the camera, but you'll talk to me. Why should the voters of Pennsylvania, right now it's a primary, closed primary, why should they vote for you?
Because the goal of this exercise is to get the person who is best qualified to beat the sitting governor. And for a variety of reasons, I think that's me. Number one, I'm the only person in this race who has spent the last 15 years working hard on these issues from the private sector, but from a corner of Pennsylvania where that private sector leadership, of which I was a part, coupled with government to get things done, to transform the Pittsburgh region from dead in the water when I moved there in 1980 to one of the most livable places in the country. And what we did there can and should be done in every corner of Pennsylvania. And so when you're looking to hire somebody, you ask them, have you done it before with success? And we have. I was an important part of leading that effort with many other women.
Weren't you the head of, was it the Allegheny Chamber of Commerce or Pittsburgh, which one?
So over the years, I was chair of the chamber. I was chair of the Economy League, which does the heavy number crunching on pension and tax reform. I was the vice chair of the Workforce Investment Board, where we reconfigured the entire workforce development system. I was on the executive committee, the Allegheny Conference, for almost 10 years, vice chair of the Pennsylvania System of Higher Education, on the board of a major foundation, on the board of more than 20 nonprofits. All of those formed an experience base where I learned to work on these issues and to actually get things done.
What we're going to do, what we've done on this program with the three candidates, we're going to stay away from these vicious ads, television ads that have appeared. And I want to give each of the candidates an opportunity to explain, if elected, what they would do on some of the major issues that the governor of the Commonwealth has to face. So I want to turn to one of the more, and I'll be relative about this, certainly one of the most significant appropriations by the state legislature in conjunction with the governor is education funding. As you know, the schools have argued for some time that they've been underfunded. Certainly public higher education falls into that category. What's your general philosophy about public education and what should be done, if anything, about the funding?
Education is the future of this Commonwealth, because the people that we educate and train are the future citizens and workforce of the Commonwealth. I think we have made a mistake in education by using the F word, the funding word. We have conflated throwing more money at solving the problem, and it hasn't solved the problem. What we need to do is change our lens. We need to look at student outcomes. We need to provide better educational alternatives, because children learn differently. All children learn differently. And we need to provide that diversity of learning experience so we can meet our kids where we find them and make sure that they learn in the way that's best for them. And we need to change the way we look at this. It is not dollars in, it is success out. That's the measure we need to begin to focus on.
All right. Well, the principal way in which education gets paid for, and there's a debate over this, is the property tax. And it's by far in the polls the most unpopular tax in this state. It's not even, none of the other taxes are close. Some of the other candidates say, well, it's eliminated completely. What's your position on the property tax?
Well, an important point is my opponents are not saying eliminate it completely. They're saying substitute other taxes for it. That's an important point. It's an important point. I have taken a different tack. I think it is important to reduce property taxes. And the property tax issue, as you know, is the pension issue. The reason everybody's property taxes are going up is because we haven't addressed our pension crisis. And I think you're going to get to that in a moment. But what I have said on property taxes is the following. There are two reasons why it is important that we reduce them to keep it as some component of our funding source. Because if you convert completely to the market-based taxes that my opponents are talking about, whether it's sales tax or income tax, when the market crashes, as we have experienced in our lifetime, when people are not buying things or making money, we cannot have education completely collapse at the same time. We need to provide greater stability for education. We also know that when you convert to market-based taxes, Harrisburg is going to suck up that money, and local places are going to lose control over their education. We want to maintain local control, and keeping property tax a component is a part of it.
All right, we're going to run to a break when we come back. Pensions, but I also want to talk about energy, its importance in this state, and we'll do that with Laura Ellsworth after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. I'm chatting with Laura Ellsworth, one of the three Republicans that want to take on, what's that guy's name? Oh, Tom Wolf. How could we forget that Governor Tom Wolf? At any rate, I want to, before we get to pensions, hopefully we'll have time for that, I want to talk about energy. It's a big deal. Marcellus Shale has become huge in terms of the Pennsylvania economy. We have the cracker plant opening up in Beaver County. It's going to employ thousands of people, as I understand it, directly and indirectly. And then there's a big debate about something called the Marcellus shale tax. And it's very popular with the voters. Governor Wolf supports it. What's your position on the shale tax?
The shale industry presents the single greatest economic driver for not just our generation, but for 2 generations yet to come, for 2 reasons. Not just because it provides energy to our homes, but because it provides downstream manufacturing opportunities. And what that means is, energy is the #1 cost of sophisticated manufacturing, and transportation cost is the #1 component of that. So if you can site a manufacturing facility right on top of the energy source, it is a huge cost advantage. It is the single greatest way that we will grow existing businesses here and attract new businesses here. And the other benefit is that it's wet gas, meaning it contains the chemical constituents of manufacturing, the feedstock. Again, we can give you the chemical constituents right under your feet. It is a fabulous opportunity to draw manufacturing here. We have to get it right. Governor Wolf doesn't have it right, because the way these companies decide where to invest their assets is they compare the cost of doing business in Pennsylvania to the cost of doing business around the world where they have those assets. And if the numbers don't come out right, they will leave it in the ground here for 200 years. It's all the same to them.
I just want to point out, when we talk about the shale tax, we're talking about a tax on the cubic feet of natural gas that's extracted from the deep wells, just so we understand it. They all pay, the shale companies pay an impact fee now. That's on the existence of the wells themselves. Now, but Governor Wolf, on the other hand, has certainly not been an enemy of energy. Some have argued about efforts to regulate it more, but he's not been hostile to the shale industry. But overall, you think it's too important. You finished my thought. Too important for
to get
the
it wrong,
economy.
and he's got it wrong. And he talks a good game, but he's not delivering on it. So these companies don't care whether you call it an impact fee, an extraction fee. They don't care what you call it. They're totaling up the total cost of doing business here. There is a number for an extraction fee that will get it out of the ground. And we get to that number by having a forthright, honest conversation with the companies, with the legislature, with the leadership, and we come to a number that we know will get it out of the ground. I almost had my head explode when I heard the governor's budget address. When I heard the number he threw out, it will stay in the ground for 200 years at that number. We have to stop using it for politics. We have to have a business person's approach to this that's in the best interest of the people of Pennsylvania, because it does them no good if it stays in the ground. We have to have somebody who understands this business. We've been in it for more than 20 years.
Look, one of the things that you're going to have to deal with is the rising cost of government, and the fact that even this year the governor's budget recommendation was a little more than 3%, about $1 billion more. We'll see what the legislature does with it. But then we get into this issue of new taxes, and you've been asked this over and over again. So you're elected governor. The state has a tough budget cycle. Are you going to make a pledge that you're not going to raise any taxes at all? What would your general position be for the voters of the state?
I think it's irresponsible for anybody to take a no tax pledge. And if you look at prior people who did it, it got them into trouble because they weren't honest with the electorate. So what I will say is I will do everything I can to bring taxes down. And what we just talked about, the Marcellus Shale and the gas industry, if we get that number right, it will generate new business, new tax base. We'll grow the tax base this way and bring more taxpayers into the system, rather than raising the taxes of the people who are already here. That's what we need to do.
All right, you're elected. You're elected. What's the first 2 or 3 things you'll do?
The first thing I'll do is develop what we call the business plan for Pennsylvania. We call it the MAP, a visual representation of what we intend Pennsylvania to look like 10 years from now. Every successful business I've ever worked with has 2 things, a business plan and a sound budget, and Pennsylvania has neither. We need to begin by creating that business plan, understanding where we want to go for 10 years, and what that will do is it will unlock the genius of the private sector, because they'll see where we're going, they'll see where their investments and their business have opportunity. That's what we need in Pennsylvania.
Okay. So with that in mind, do you have any policy priorities? I mean, specifically, we have about 30 seconds left.
It's to get the business plan in place, to get a sound budget in place, and to get our regulatory environment under control, meaning it is to be responsive to the needs of the citizen, it is to do their job, but to get to yes, and to help businesses do what they do best, which is create jobs and economic opportunity for our citizens.
Well, look, I want to thank you for coming in. The best of luck to you. As I said, we're neutral here. We're having all 3 candidates come in on this program. They're welcome. If you get elected, the standing governor of the Commonwealth has or the governor of the Commonwealth, I should say, has a standing invitation anytime the governor, for obvious reasons when you have the governor. But I want to thank you and good luck to you.
I hope to be back.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. Russ McDaid is about to come on. We have got a bunch of considerations and aspects. We're going to talk about senior citizens, obviously important given the number of them that dwell in the state.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
65 plus out of about 12 million people we're talking about for seniors. 2.1 million out of 12 million, that's 1 out of every 6 people in the state are seniors. And guess what? In 20 years, seniors will be 9% of Pennsylvania's population. Something you're the expert on all of this. That's what you deal with. But it's a huge part of the population of the state. And, the legislature funds a variety of programs for them. Sometimes it gets a lot of attention and sometimes it doesn't. I'm chatting with Russ McDaid. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association. He comes in to give us a senior citizen update. Take it. Go wherever you want with that.
Well, Terry, it doesn't get enough attention from our viewpoint. And from time to time, we have to sit back and take stock of how we're investing in our seniors and our state budget. In the governor's proposed budget this year, for the 4th time in 4 proposed budgets, we see no funding increase for our most frail and vulnerable seniors, those requiring 24/7 round-the-clock care in nursing facilities, and it's a significant challenge and concern for us.
Yeah, well, I guess the point is, it's an election year. There's not going to be any tax hikes. I think you would agree. The governor wants the shale tax, and I talked a little bit about that with Laura. The legislature is not likely to give it to him. So what literally can be done? First of all, I want to talk a little specifically about the programs, but in general, what can be done to increase funding?
Well, yeah, first about the programs. I mean, we're talking about round-the-clock skilled care for our most frail and vulnerable Pennsylvanians. And when we look at budget priorities, each and every year, the budget's always tight. There are always challenges. Yet we find a way to increase funding. Over the last 4 years, we've increased funding for education to the tune of 10%, in our roads and infrastructure to the tune of 7%, for convicted criminals living in our state prisons to the tune of another 10%, and health care for those convicted criminals. Think about that. And we're talking about flat funding for seniors in Medicaid-funded nursing facilities. Yet at the same time, the administration has noted they've needed an 18% increase to keep up with the rising cost of health care for convicted criminals in our prisons. I mean, it doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, name some of the programs that you think the state ought to be increasing the funding for.
Oh, across the board.
Seniors.
You talked, the population's going up. The rising tide needs to go up with it. We have this, we have this belief that if we fund less nursing facility care, I think things will take care of itself. There's an initiative within the administration, within many states, to try to serve as many people as we can at home. Makes all the sense in the world when you can be served at home. I can tell you, and the dedicated men and women providing care in our nursing facilities can tell you, that there are very few, if any, people residing in our nursing facilities who can stay home.
Not to get personal, but my mother was in a nursing home, and it became impossible to keep her home. I mean, there is a point, and as you accurately point out, I mean, for some people, that's great if they want to do it. But at some point, the care gets so significant, or the need for the care becomes so important, families can't do it. Am I wrong? Right?
No, our people in our nursing facilities are older, sicker, and need more care than ever. They cost more money than ever. And we have inflation every year. We're living longer. And so we don't get to the facility doors until 85 or 90 now. Maybe we used to get there younger. But when we do get there, we're high cost. And we absolutely need to see an investment in that care in this year's budget. When we talk to legislators about this, and it's now in the legislature's hands, Terry, the governor flat funded the line item. Now the legislature has the opportunity to increase funding for this population. And we hear from them the challenges that you noted. And I kind of tell them, look, that's above my pay grade. The how is their job, but we've got to find a way to plus up dollars in this budget. All
right, when we come back from this break, I want to talk about lawsuit abuse reform, something that's high on your priority list as well, and we'll do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine, and by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
I'm chatting with Russ McDaid from the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association. Before we get on the lawsuit, I mean, I think there's a resistance at first to go into them. I know my mother wasn't wild about it. She didn't want to go in. And then when she went in, we couldn't, she wouldn't leave if she had had the opportunity because of the experience there. Is that what you find in most cases?
We hear that all the time. We hear that all the time. We have those tough conversations. You and I have talked about those difficult conversations. Mom or dad go in, and it's not the most pleasant day, the day that they have to go into the facility. And the next time a family member comes to visit, they don't have time for them. They've got to get
busy
to lunch.
Doing all their things.
Right. We've got cards at 2 o'clock. We're going on a trip to see a show this evening. And so it really does. You really can live a robust life within a senior living community.
Yeah, good point. All right. Lawsuit abuse reform is an important topic in the legislature, but it sometimes takes a backstage to all the budget, the things we were just talking about. Bring us up to date. What's the status of legislation, and what's the likelihood anything will get done?
Yeah, lawsuit abuse reform, first of all, it is a budget issue. We're seeing hundreds of millions of dollars over a course of several years leave this state to the pockets of predatory out-of-state lawyers who are placing ads in our papers and targeting Pennsylvania nursing facilities because of our lax tort climate here in Pennsylvania. So it's very much a budget issue as well, because it's taking dollars out of the hands of the dedicated men and women who are providing care in this state. There's a bill introduced in the Pennsylvania legislature, it's House Bill 1037, that would provide the same protections that physicians have had in Pennsylvania.
What's that?
For more than 15 years. And so it would place a limit on punitive damages. Back in the early 2000s, doctors were fleeing Pennsylvania because our court climate, specialists couldn't make a go of it. Obstetricians and orthopeds and neurologists were fleeing Pennsylvania because they were getting sued so frequently. At the time the MCARE Act was passed, that cap was put in place, which gave them predictability and leveled the playing field for them. They can now practice in Pennsylvania. Look, when they're wrong, they pay. But when they're not, they can take a case to court without fear of losing their practice because of a runaway jackpot punitive jury verdict. We're trying to get the same protections for long-term care providers.
So is this a total solution? Is it a partial solution to the lawsuit abuse problem?
It's the first of a number of solutions that we need to see. You know, we got to take on the one that's in front of us. So this will, right now, long-term care providers are forced to settle 80% of their cases out of court.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's what I hear most of the time is that they don't end up in court, they just make a payment, right?
And it's not because they're wrong.
Yeah.
It's because they can't afford to take the financial risk of going to court because of the risk of that big jackpot punitive award. If that's taken off the top, then facilities can go to court, and perhaps as importantly, consumers can have their day in court too. Make no mistake, this is a pro-consumer bill, Terry.
Well, that begs one important question. The legislature can have its moments where it doesn't do very much. So where does it all stand?
You know what? They've been wonderful on this issue, and we're very optimistic that the time is approaching to get this done. We've had conversations with many of the members of the Pennsylvania House, with a number of the members of the Pennsylvania Senate, our dedicated men and women, and the people who are receiving care in our nursing facilities have made the case that this is an important protection for them. And I think we're close to getting this done in the Pennsylvania House, so stay tuned.
Okay, well, it's got to get through the Senate and then to the governorship. We're just about out of time. Well, you want to come in and keep us updated on that. I'll give you an assignment, right, to make sure we're updated on that.
Will do.
Thanks for coming in. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.